In a previous programme, we saw how your CV is of such crucial importance in the job search process, and how I was able to help 3 people produce really effective CVs, designed to make them irresistible to potential employers. Katie Foster, a recent school leaver, started off with a CV that was all style but very little substance. Printed on bright yellow paper with fancy borders and a multitude of decorative fonts, it certainly stood out. But it told employers little or nothing about the valuable skills and experience Katie had acquired through her Saturday job in hairdressing.
There you go, Mrs. Perry. Suzanne will be with you shortly. Okay.
And through the cleaning and typing enterprises she'd established. The new CV we put together was a fairly generic one, since Katie wasn't yet sure what career or industry she wanted to work in, and it zeroed in on her key qualities as a reliable, hard-working young person with excellent IT and telephone skills, enterprise and initiative. And its presentation was smart, professional and businesslike, creating a real air of quality about Katie as a potential employee. Kevin Nelson, in his late 30s, was doing a mundane factory job and working behind a bar in the evenings, just to keep his family's head above water until he could find another position in the electrical industry in which he'd worked since leaving school, until his most recent employer had gone bust. Kevin was an experienced, highly qualified senior electrician. His problem, and the reason he hadn't yet had a single interview, having applied for several jobs, which would have been right up his street, was that this information was buried in his CV amongst his life story, 4 closely typed pages of irrelevant waffle which employers just wouldn't bother to read. His new career-specific CV focused succinctly on the key skills, knowledge and abilities which Kevin could put to work for employers in the electrical industry in order to meet their particular needs, and nothing else. Vikram Khan had applied for an advertised job as an accounts clerk with a chemicals company, for which, on the face of it, he was ideally suited. To his surprise, though, he hadn't even been offered an interview. His existing CV was smart and well presented, but it was very much a generic off-the-shelf CV. What he needed was a CV which was tailored to the very specific needs set out by the employer in the advertisement. I was able to help Vikram produce an excellent job-specific CV, which was likely to be much more effective in this kind of job search situation. Now, the job your CV needs to do is to persuade the employer that yours is the one that should go straight on that pile marked for interview. One reason they'll do that is because your CV is smart professional, and they can immediately identify the fact that you offer the skills, experience, qualifications and achievements they are looking for. Another absolutely critical factor, though, is the covering letter which accompanies your CV. Never underestimate the value of your covering letter. It's just as important as every other aspect of the application process, probably more so. It is often the very first thing a potential employer will see. It's tempting, after working so hard at producing an effective CV, just to run off a letter quickly so that you can get it in the post straight away. But you must remember that your letter and CV come as a complete package, and it's vital that your letter makes your CV work for you. It could mean the difference between getting an interview or having your CV filed in the waste bin. So, having helped Katie, Kevin and Vikram with their CVs, let's now look at how they approach writing those vital covering letters.
I think one of the most important things I learned from Helen when I went to see her about my CV is that its presentation is almost as important as its content. If the presentation's wrong, it just gives the employer an excuse to bin your CV immediately without even getting as far as reading the content. If that applies to your CV, then surely it applies equally for your covering letter.
I suppose, in the past, I've not really bothered to take much care with the letter. I guess I've thought, nobody really reads the letter. The CV's the most important thing. The letter's just something you have to send with it.
It makes no sense, really. It's mad to go to all the trouble of producing a really professional CV and then wrecking it with an amateurish looking letter. They both go together as a package.
I cringe now when I think about that first CV I did. That fluorescent paper and all those colours. It's a business document, so it's got to look like one. and the same applies to the letter that accompanies it.
Yeah, I'm a bit embarrassed about showing you some of these, really. Copies of some of the letters I sent before I went to see Helen. Scruffy, handwritten, paper torn out of a pad, crossings out, a nice coffee stain there. Not properly addressed. It's hardly surprising I got nothing but rejections.
Yeah, I think good, neat presentation is really important. It says so much about you as a person.
You must include a personalised covering letter with every CV you send out. Never just send a CV on its own. It's standard accepted practice, really.
Do you think the letter should be typed or handwritten?
Well, that's actually a question that comes up a lot, actually. If they specifically request one or the other, then that's what you should give them. But in the absence of that, there are pros and cons to each. A handwritten letter shows that you've thought about it. You've taken your time. You haven't just pressed print on the computer. It can add a personal touch, and it can show that your handwriting is neat and legible, if indeed it is, which, well, it's still an important factor in some jobs. On the other hand, a typed letter is always going to be easier to read and does look more professional and businesslike.
So which would you go for?
Well, on balance, unless the employer specifically asks for a handwritten letter, or you really feel that your handwriting is a credit to you, I'd always suggest that it's safer to type it. It's pretty much the norm these days. It's a business letter, and it should look like one, and that means typed. If you don't have a computer, borrow one. Persuade someone to do it for you, or even pay to have it done professionally.
So, presumably, like with my CV, the covering letter should be on plain white paper.
That's right. The paper you use should be the same paper that you've used for your CV, which normally means good quality white A4, 100 gram preferably, as should the fonts and everything else. As I say, they form a complete package. Ideally, you should be using 12-point type. Certainly no smaller than 10-point. Make sure that you use simple black type and avoid garish colours and fancy borders.
How long do you think the letter should be?
I'd say 4 or 5 paragraphs on no more than one side of the A4. The layout should be visually attractive, simple, well spaced out and not squashed up. Each paragraph should ideally be no more than 3 sentences. Each sentence should be short and to the point, in any case a maximum of 2 lines. The first sentence in each paragraph should introduce the topic to be covered in that paragraph.
How should it be laid out?
The layout of your letter should be the same as any other business letter, really. There are differing opinions as to where the address should go as the sender. Some people say it should go in the top left-hand corner, other people say the top right-hand corner. Personally, I quite like it to be centred, which means it looks like a letter heading and matches up with your CV. You can also include here the other contact details you put on your CV, like your telephone, mobile numbers and your email address. This is a good idea in case your CV and letter get separated. Then below that, on the left-hand side, the date on which you're sending the letter. Then below that, we want the name of the person you're writing to, their job title and the company address. It's very important here that you should always try and write to a named individual. If you don't have the name, say, because you're writing to company on spec, what you need to do is ring up, find out who the appropriate person is and what their job title is. It's worth it and it shows initiative. If, say, for example, the job ad says personnel manager, then what you need to do is ring up and find out what their name is, and absolutely vital here, the correct spelling. It can really pay dividends if you have been the only person bothered to find out the name of the recipient. It can help distinguish you from other applicants, which is what the letter's all about in the first place. It means that when it comes to the salutation, which goes below the name and address, you're not just going to be putting dear sir and madam, which sounds so cold and impersonal.
It does, doesn't it?
You do, however, have to be a little bit careful with people's names and titles. If the advert says Mrs. Jane Smith, then it's no problem. It's Dear Mrs. Smith, not Dear Jane though. You don't know her and it's too familiar at this stage. If the advert says Jane Smith, then you have to be a little bit careful because you don't know whether she's a Miss or a Mrs. Or alternatively, she might prefer to be called Ms, or she might hate Ms. So the best policy here is to ring up and find out how she likes to be addressed.
What if it just says J. Smith, for example?
Well, if it says J. Smith, the problem's greater because you don't know whether you're writing to a male or female, so you should really find out. And it also could be a cunning trap set by the employer just to see how the applicants deal with the issue. So it's really worth making the effort to get it right.
devious.
Underneath this, in bold type, the title of the job you're applying for. Then the 4 or 5 paragraphs, the actual content of the letter, which we'll come onto shortly. Finally, it's important to end their letter correctly. If you've written to a named individual, it's yours sincerely with a small s, not a capital S, a very common mistake. If you've had to use dear sir or madam, then it's yours faithfully, again with a small f. Then your signature with your name typed underneath. As on your CV, this should be the name in which you're normally known by. So you don't need to include your middle name. And if your real name is Catherine, but everybody knows you as Katie, then just use Katie.
Anything else on the subject of the letter's presentation?
Yes. It's really important to check it carefully before you send it out. Get someone else to check it as well if you can, since a fresh pair of eyes often spot things you've missed. Check for typing errors, spelling, punctuation, grammar. Errors here can make you look careless or lazy or lacking in attention to detail, resulting in your letter going straight in the bin. Print it out. You should be using a good quality laser or inkjet printer. And then together with your CV, insert it into a matching A4 envelope. A hardback one if you really want to push the boat out. It's best to avoid folding it so that the whole package reaches the employer in the same pristine condition it left you. Add a printed label, which looks so much more professional than a handwritten envelope. And then you're done. An application package that looks smart, professional, crisp and businesslike. Alternatively, more and more companies these days are wanting you to send your CV and letter by email. So do that instead if that's what they request. Either way, always keep copies of all your correspondence in your job search file, so that you can refer back to what you said in your letter should you be successful at getting an interview.
I think the main aim of your covering letter is to prompt the employer to read your CV. Whilst your CV sets out your skills and experience, your letter allows you to show how those skills and experience fit the needs of the particular job you're applying for. So that's what the content of your letter should be planned around.
I suppose, before, I'd not really planned my letters since I didn't think there was anything to plan. I'd just run a standard introductory letter off the computer, just plug in the name and address and stuff each time. Just say what I'm applying for and that my CV's enclosed. Now, though, I realise there's a lot more your letter can do, to show that you understand the nature of the job you're applying for and to tell them why you really want that particular job.
I think the letter is the place to include information that doesn't really fit into the CV. You don't want to be just duplicating your CV, like why you want the job and the key things that set you apart from the other applicants.
You need to do some research about the company and the job that you're applying for, and then highlight your suitability by drawing attention to your relevant qualifications. I think you're wasting your time if you can't show the employers that you're going to be able to meet their needs. When employers are receiving maybe hundreds of applications, they're only going to invite you for an interview if your application stands out and if they can see a benefit for themselves.
I think it's important to remember that your CV isn't going to get you the job. All it can do is get you past first base, get you in through the door. The role of your letter is to highlight the key parts of your CV for that particular job. It's important you keep that in mind when you're writing it. The sole objective of the letter is to get your CV read, and through that to get the interview.
It's a good idea to use your letter to demonstrate that you've done some research into the employer and pull together all the threads of your application to a strong, coherent case, emphasising the key elements that make you the best candidate for the job.
In your case, Katie, you're mainly going to be writing speculatively to lots of different companies with a view to doing either office or shop work. So you'll be sending out the generic CV we devised.
That's right.
This can be actually quite a good method of finding work. There's unlikely to be a glut of other applicants, which means that your application won't end up at the bottom of a great big pile and should in theory receive more attention. The company should immediately recognise your initiative that you've written to them even though they haven't advertised a specific job vacancy. You may get a fairly low response rate, but if you do happen to hit upon an employer that does have a vacancy, the competition could be much less fierce. And it also means they may keep your CV on file if an appropriate job does come up. What it doesn't mean, though, is that you can just send out a standard form letter to as many possible employers that you can find, almost like junk mail. You still need to tailor each letter to meet the needs of that particular company if it's to have any chance of success. What happens to most junk mail?
Goes straight in the bin.
Exactly. Obviously, you can edit existing letters rather than starting from scratch each time, but sending out a cold, impersonal letter just tells the employer that you've no interest in their specific company and you don't care who you work for. By tailoring the letter to meet their needs, it shows initiative and interest. It also gives the employer a feel about you and how you might fit into their organisation.
Yes, I can see that.
So, based on the format we discussed earlier when we talked about the presentation of your letter, let's start building it up.
Okay.
Firstly, your address and contact details, the same as on your CV, followed by today's date. Then the recipient's name, title and company address. Obviously, we'll just make something up for now. But since you're not applying for advertised vacancies, it's unlikely you'll know the name of the person you need to write to. So you'll need to find out by ringing them up. Just ask them who the appropriate person would be to write to about office administration jobs, say, what their title is, and how they prefer to be addressed. And if it's an unusual name, make sure you get the correct spelling. Then the salutation. Let's say Dear Mrs. Smith for now. If you found out a name, you won't need to put the dreaded Dear Sir, Madam, which makes it sound like a standard junk mail letter, which is very unlikely to get read and noticed. Followed by a heading in bold type, which immediately tells them exactly what you're writing to them about. You'll need to think about this, but let's say office administration vacancies for now. Be careful not to be too narrow about this, in case you rule yourself out of some positions which might in fact be quite suitable, but don't be too broad either, or you might be perceived as being unfocused or indecisive, just wanting any old job. Then the 4 or 5 paragraphs which make up the meat of your letter. Paragraph 1 should tell them exactly why you're writing and that your CV is enclosed. It's a good idea to mention your CV early to get your letter and your CV working in harness, if you like, from the start. In your case, this could read something like, I'm writing to inquire about the possibility of working for company name in an office administration capacity. My CV is enclosed and I believe this indicates that I have the skills and qualities needed for such a role. Paragraph 2 and 3, if necessary, should highlight the key relevant experience and skills on your CV, which means that you can make a positive contribution to this company and meet their needs. Of course, since you're writing on spec, they haven't told you what those needs are. You need to try and anticipate what the job description might be, based on your research, and respond to this. You might have researched the company by visiting their website, looking in the directories at the library, reading the press, obtaining their brochures or their annual reports, or it might just be some information you've picked up on the grapevine, or from talking to somebody amongst your network of contacts who knows the company. Either way, your research knowledge of the company is vital here, to give you something to hang your hat on in this part of your letter. It could read something like, in particular, the jobs I have had since leaving school have enabled me to demonstrate that I am a reliable, hard-working person, good at working under pressure as part of a small team. I have strong IT skills, being proficient in Microsoft Word with a typing speed of 65 words per minute. I am personal and confident in dealing with both customers and other staff on the telephone, and I am organised and accurate in clerical work. In the next paragraph, you need to tell them why you want to work for this specific company. Again, this will be based on the information you found out when you were doing your research. You also need to tell them how you could fit into the organisation. A prospective employee who you've written to on spec won't bother to try and figure this out. The responsibility for communicating your skills and your potential value as an employee lies with you. This paragraph might go something like, I understand from recent local press reports that the company is expanding rapidly due to several new orders having been won. Various contacts have suggested that this means you will be needing additional administrative staff, and being very ambitious, well, I would relish the challenge of furthering my career with such a successful forward-thinking company. Your closing paragraph needs to give the letter a positive, upbeat conclusion, and you need to make it clear what your next course of action will be. Since you've written to them and asked, you can't automatically expect them to reply. you should take the initiative by saying that you'll phone in the next few days to try and arrange a meeting. For example, I very much hope that my abilities and achievements will be of interest to you. To this end, I will telephone you in the next few days to discuss the possibility of an interview. Finishing off with yours sincerely, since you're writing to a named individual, your name, and don't forget to sign it. Okay, so how does that sound?
Sounds great.
Right, take that away, give it some thought for a few days, and let's see what you come back with.
Okay.
Dear Mrs. Smith, I'm writing to inquire about the possibility of working for Black & Green Limited in an office administration capacity. My CV is enclosed, and I believe this indicates that I have the skills and qualities needed for such a role. In particular, my activities since leaving school have enabled me to demonstrate that I am a reliable, hard-working, trustworthy person, good at working under pressure as part of a small team. I have strong IT skills, being proficient in Microsoft Word with a typing speed of 65 words per minute. I am personable and confident in dealing with both customers and other staff on the telephone, and I am organised and accurate in clerical work. I have also demonstrated initiative and self-motivation. I understand from recent local press reports that Black & Green Limited is expanding rapidly due to several new orders having been won. Various contacts who know the company have suggested that this means you are likely to be recruiting additional administrative staff. Being very ambitious, I would relish the challenge of furthering my career with such a successful, forward-looking organisation. I very much hope that my abilities and achievements will be of interest to you. I am available for interview at any convenient time, and I will telephone you in the next few days to discuss this possibility. Yours sincerely, Katie Foster. This is excellent, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really pleased with it.
You should be. It captures the attention. It clearly tells me why you're writing and what you could contribute. And together with your CV, if I was an employer, I'd be putting you straight on that interview pile. Good luck, Katie.
Thanks, Helen. I'll let you know how I get on.
In your case, Kevin, you're primarily going to be writing to companies on spec, but this time all to companies in the electrical industry. So you'll be sending out the career-specific CV we devised.
Okay.
I think you need to bear in mind all the following points when it comes to constructing the covering letter. Letters are used to screen candidates for interview consideration, and like your CV, has probably no more than 20 or 30 seconds to make the desired impact. Your letter needs to be concise, literate and to the point, but without being rambling and monotonous. You should consider the tone of your letter. Make sure that it reflects self-confidence, enthusiasm, positivity, but without bragging. You have to make sure that the letter tells the employer why you would be good for the job, rather than why the job would be good for you.
Right.
Your letter demonstrates your written communication skills, which your CV can't because it's largely constructed in bullet points, etc. This may be an important consideration for many employers still. Unless you're specifically asked for it, I wouldn't recommend putting anything in the letter about previous salary or salary expectation. This can only act as a reason to reject you. It's too expensive. It can't possibly get you an interview. Similarly, don't include references. It's highly unlikely that an employer will want references until they're on the point of offering you the job, i.e. after the interview.
Really?
Yeah, so just leave them out. It takes up valuable space. So considering all those points and the structure we talked about earlier, you go away for a few days and let's see what you come up with using the information in the CV we've already produced.
All right.
This is very good indeed.
Yes, I think it reads well.
Dear Mr. Connolly, I would like to apply for the position of Contracts Installation Manager, as advertised in the Evening Telegraph on the 16th of August 03. My CV is enclosed, and I believe this indicates that I have the skills and experience you require for this role. I have worked in the electrical industry at a senior level for over 20 years. Most recently, I was Installation Manager at Peterson Electrical Contractors, where I was solely responsible on many major projects for team leadership, planning, budgeting, scheduling, quality control, customer liaison and overall profitability. During my 10 years at Peterson and in the course of my earlier career, I have developed a number of specialisations which I feel would prove valuable if I were to join Connolly Electrical. These have included such areas as safety, fault diagnosis and rectification, and electrical and building regulations. As indicated on my CV, I am currently an elected committee member of the West Yorkshire Institute of Electrical Contractors. Through my institute activities, I have built up a wide network of contacts in the industry, and I understand from various sources that Connolly has secured a number of important new contracts in recent months. This is presumably the reason you are seeking a new contracts installation manager, and the idea of furthering my career with such a growth-orientated, forward-looking company appeals to me greatly. I'm available for interview at any convenient time, and I very much look forward to hearing from you soon. Yours sincerely, Kevin Nelson. This, packaged with your CV, and I think you'll be back in the electrical industry in no time.
I hope you're right.
In your case, Vikram, you're responding to specific job ads, so you'll be sending out the job-specific CV we've already prepared. In any case, your CV will have to change each time depending on what the job ad says, not just your letter.
That's right.
Initially, you're applying again for the accounts clerk job at Star Chemicals.
Yeah. They obviously didn't have any good enough applications the first time round, so they've re-advertised it. And with my sparkling new CV, I might as well give it another go. It's right up my street still.
Absolutely right. Now, the employer has set out some very definite requirements in the job ad, so what we need to do is go through this point by point and make sure we respond to each of these points in your letter.
Okay.
Right, let's make a list of all the requirements. It's an accounting job. That's what you do, and you have done for 7 years, so we need to major on that. The salary is $16,000 plus benefits, which is obviously more than you earn now.
So, obviously, it's a more senior position. I need to reassure them that I'm ready for that.
Continuing expansion of the company. Star Chemicals is clearly a vibrant, expanding company. We need to say that that suits you. Fully experienced. Your CV demonstrates this amply. Fully qualified. Again, your CV states that you've passed all the accounting exams you've taken to date, including ACCA Parts 1 and 2. Proven experience of dealing with suppliers in the chemical industry environment.
That's precisely what I've been doing for the last 4 years at Mercury Chemicals.
Exactly. Knowledge of Sage desirable. You're an advanced user of Sage, enabling you to take control of our sales and purchase ledgers. You already manage those at Mercury.
So, I'm used to handling VAT returns, production of month-end accounts to tight deadlines, and the provision of comprehensive financial information for management. I do all that at Mercury as well.
Demonstrable success in achieving strict credit control targets. Your CV refers to your measurable success in that field. Ability to work well under pressure and part of a small team. Well, you already do that at Mercury. Good verbal and written communication skills. Well, hopefully the letter will show the latter.
And with any luck, I'll be able to demonstrate the former at the interview.
Right, so now it's a case of constructing a succinct, concise letter which covers all these points and persuades the employer that they should go on and read your CV. Bear in mind that some of the requirements are seen as less important than others. Watch out for words and phrases like proven experience, need, a particularly important requirement, as opposed to desirable, for example. By spelling out what they require, they're saying if you don't have it, don't bother applying. You need to show evidence for each point, and this pretty much structures your letter for you. While your CV tells the employer about you, be careful not just to regurgitate it for your letter. Your letter should concentrate on the needs of the position and the company and how you can meet those needs. Make sure that you fully research the company, maybe by visiting their website, so that you can use this information to help you draft your letter and clearly articulate your competitive advantage. Constructing your letter will take some time, but off the top of my head, your letter could go something like this. Dear Mr. Rowley, I would like to apply for the position of accounts clerk as advertised in the Yorkshire Evening Post on the 10th of August 03. My CV is enclosed, and I believe this indicates that Good afternoon, Helen Phillips. Oh, that's fantastic, Vikram. When is it? Brilliant. Well, really good luck with that, and let me know how you get on, okay? All right, I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.